Lana, roll call, please.
Mayor DeBold,
Here.
trustees Amos.
Here.
Brockman.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Luciano.
Here.
And Selfridge.
All right, we do have a quorum for this evening. We can conduct village business. With that, I will move into our citizens portion of the evening. Are there any citizens wishing to address the village board?
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms.
Nice
Olson.
to see many of you again. I am here today with a request of our village. Back in August of 2016, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a drafted ordinance to prohibit short-term rentals in the village of Shorewood. It was tabled when it got to the village board, and it kind of has just sat out there in Never Land all these years. Well, the problem is being brought up again because we have issues throughout the village, but most definitely in the small, intimate neighborhood of River Bluff Estates. There are 3 advertised short-term Airbnbs in just my little neighborhood. I don't know how many there are throughout the whole village. All 3 of them are owned by the same entity, 2 of them under the commercial name of Expert Electric Incorporated. We see this as a commercial enterprise that has a dramatically negative effect on our residential neighborhood. My neighbors don't know who's living in the place across the street from me. They don't know in the middle of the night when they walk their dogs who is coming and going from these homes. It is not a desirable thing to have happening in our village. Since the word has gotten out, we've had people from other neighborhoods, the Hunt Club, River Oaks South, all come and also sign a petition that I have here to leave with you tonight, asking for you to please look at this again. And I think the time has probably come that we need to do something about this, particularly if Joliet continues their plans and we end up with a casino close by and some of the other things that are planned for the Rock Run Crossing. This is an issue now of the 3 units that are advertised online. One of them already has short-term renters in it, 4 men who work at a refinery. They come from 4 different states, and they have not so far been a problem, but it's just the start, and we would like the village to relook at this ordinance that was written and passed by Planning and Zoning back in 2018. I have attached a copy of the ordinance and all the signatures of the neighbors that have signed it in the last 3 days, 114 signatures in 3 days from numerous neighborhoods, but most particularly River Bluff Estates at this point. So I would like to leave this with Lona, if I could, and ask your indulgence to please take this seriously and look this over, as it's having a negative impact in one of your neighborhoods now, and that will do nothing but spread. I have been online, I've done my homework. Elk Grove Village, there's a lot of villages in our state who have had problems with this and have been forced to pass ordinances also. So, with all respect, I ask you to look at this again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else for citizens wishing to address the village board? Just approach the mic.
Hello, is this good?
Yep, can you state your name for the clerk though, please?
Yep, my name is Kiera Gavin. Do you need address or? Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the time this evening. I am here as the project developer for the proposed solar project, Jasmine Solar, which is just west of town. I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of the project. I also have 2 colleagues here to speak a little bit more on the project. There is also a resolution on your agenda to discuss the project further, and we will be here and happy to discuss any questions that you have during that time. First, I want to address a question that you all likely have, which is why here. So how we determine a proposed spot for any community solar farm in Illinois is based on a few criteria, the most critical being the interconnection feasibility with ComEd. So there are limited viable interconnection points with ComEd where you have the correct proximity, so you're within about 3 to 5 miles of a substation and on a distribution line that is 3-phase and has sufficient capacity to support a community solar project of this size. So in terms of interconnection feasibility for ComEd, this is indicating that this is a viable area for our project. We then do outreach to local landowners, and this is an area where the Feeneys, the landowners who are present tonight as well, had interest in pursuing a solar project on their property. They indicated that they've been reached out to by many solar developers who had been interested in this possible location and did not see interest or outreach from residential developers about their property. In pursuing that, we look at other indicators as well in terms of feasibility of the land and environmental conditions, and this project continued to check those boxes. And finally, Will County Ordinance gives us really clear guidelines in terms of solar. It's a very well-designed, thorough ordinance that ensures that solar farms designed in the county are rigorously designed and meet their ordinance requirements. With that in mind, I understand that the town is intending to expand westward with residential expansion, and what we'd like to talk to you a little bit more about tonight and about your resolution is how the solar farm will actually be a good neighbor for that residential expansion and not an inhibitor to it. So we really see it as compatible with residential development. Solar is a quiet, self-contained, pollution-free, safe development that can coexist with residential developments in the area. So with that, I will just touch on a few of the points that you all mentioned. But we, in terms of design and how we're thinking about the points that you're concerned about with the project, I do want to mention this will not be a drain on city resources. So any requirements for interconnecting with the grid with ComEd, those are responsibility of the project. The project does not require any water or sewage resources from the city. Additionally, there's tax benefits. I know there's some mention about the value of those compared to residential tax increases, but the nice thing about the project is it has these added tax benefits, many of them going to the school district and the soon-to-be-built school across the street without adding additional strain on the school or sending additional students to the school. There's a few other points that my colleagues will touch on. I know noise was mentioned, and I do just want to touch on that. The inverters are the main source of noise on a solar project. These are what convert electricity from direct current to alternating current, and they have a humming noise comparable to an AC unit, and those are located centrally on this solar project, on any well-designed solar project based on optimizing for electrical efficiency. And the other benefit of that is it also kind of centralizes the noise. So when we think about noise impacting neighbors, it's really limited by that natural design feature and by the already limited noise of those inverters. I know there was mention of the single axis trackers having their own noise. That's a very, very limited noise from those motors that turn the single axis trackers throughout the day. I've been to solar farms myself, and you can barely hear. Like we would try to notice and pay attention to when those are shifting, and we would miss it. So really limited noise from that front. So I will wrap up there, but we, in learning of the village's expansion plans and your residential goals for development, we really do want to figure out how we can come to the table with the village and accommodate and our design to allow your continued residential development to be compatible with the solar farm design at this location. We'd encourage further dialogue and ask that you not pass the resolution of opposition for the project tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Stryker. I'm counsel to Jasmine Solar. Thank you to the members of the board and mayor for hearing me tonight. I just wanted to make a couple points in conjunction with what Kira noted, that the siting process that we're going to go through with this project is very detailed and very thorough. The land, as you know, is currently zoned Ag 1, and it's an unincorporated area of Will County. So next month we'll be going before the Will County ZBA, and that will be an evidentiary hearing where we will present witnesses. Folks will have a chance to not only question those witnesses, but make their own comments at the hearing. And we would suggest that in lieu of passing this resolution tonight, that the village take the time to come to the hearing, ask whatever questions it would like, listen to our witnesses, and draw its own conclusions from a thoroughly briefed point at that time. You'll hear from a colleague of mine next, Andrew Lines, but again, dovetailing on what Kira said, solar really does make a good neighbor. It's quiet, it goes dark at night, and it does not create any traffic. And a couple of the things in the draft resolution that I saw, I thought worthy of touching on, because again, you all will have the opportunity, if you like, to hear our detailed witnesses testify under oath on these topics and answer them. But the resolution currently states that the county ordinance does not require berms or screening from adjoining property, and therefore we won't have any. Certainly there is screening contemplated for this project, and that's one of the areas that we typically do work with villages like Shorewood or adjoining subdivisions to make sure that we're doing what we can and what's reasonable to screen off the project. And consistent with that, the ordinance talks about the process allows for a 6 to 25 foot security fence with barbed wire and razor wire on top. Well, while the ordinance may allow for that, that's not what we're planning to do. And you'll note that our proposal, as correctly stated in the resolution, is for a 7-foot fence. But again, you'll have a chance to hear before the Will County ZBA exactly what we plan to do, and again, ask questions. So I would suggest that some of the language in the resolution is somewhat alarmist, that, again, we're really not going to be putting barbed wire and razor wire where it's going to look like a prison. We're going to secure the site. It's not going to be a nuisance. But, along those lines, also the fact that there'll be no sound buffer from electric buzz. Well, what you'll hear is consistent with what Kira mentioned, that the project is designed to encircle anything that makes noise in the middle of the project. Therefore, the residences on the edge of the project should not be negatively impacted by any sound. And again, that's one of the things that we'll be getting into in detail before the Will County ZBA. And finally, I thought it noteworthy that the resolution talks about, there's no requirements for the facility to comply with village development ordinances for utility extension, roadway improvements, and other important requirements. And, dovetailing on that, again, what Kira said, this project really is a standalone project. It does not draw city resources, nor will it generate traffic. We typically do negotiate a road use agreement, and if a certain jurisdiction did not want us on those roads, we would avoid them. The traffic that's generated is generally like Ford F-150, 250 size trucks that are just going in a couple times a month, or perhaps our maintenance. And again, the maintenance is typically, we work very closely with the communities on what type of vegetation. Typically it's a pollinator or native grasses that's planted, and they go in there a couple times a year, because the only thing you don't want is for those grasses to grow above the panels. So again, we do and plan to work very closely with neighbors such as the village of Shorewood. And finally, dovetailing on what Kira said, we would ask that the resolution not be passed this evening, because again, I think it contains a lot of points that we plan to hit on, and we do hope that we convince everybody, and that everybody is left with a good feeling that we are going to be very respectful with regard to screening, sound, respect for our neighbors, not straining village resources, et cetera. And also overall with the fact that I think solar is a very good neighbor. And with that, Drew, I'll just turn it over to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. Andrew Lines, Lines. I am a partner with a firm called Cohn Resnick. We're a national advisory assurance and tax firm. I'm a certified commercial real estate appraiser, and have been for about 20 years. I'm also an MAI, which means I'm a full member of the Appraisal Institute. I help lead a valuation division of about 70 people that does all kinds of things, but also looks at property values next to supposed deleterious uses. I have a partner, her name is Pat McGarr. She also serves as the chairperson for the Department of Regulations, Financial Regulations, Real Estate Appraiser Board. So she's the #1 appraiser in the land. She was assigned that role by Governor Rauner a long time ago. The two of us have studied hundreds and hundreds of transactions of homes next to existing solar farms all across the country. We're probably the leading appraisal firm that studied this particular item next to solar farms and also next to wind farms. I've looked at very small community solar farms like this one, all the way up through very large utility scale projects that are now being developed in the 500 to 800 megawatt capacity, covering 8 to 10,000 acres. This is a relatively small project. We have examined existing solar arrays that are directly across the street from subdivisions. We've tested homes that align the back of the street directly across the street from the solar, and we've identified, doing before and after studies, that there is no negative impact or any kind of trend with any of the homes that are directly across the street from those solar facilities. In addition, we find that land parcels that are undeveloped, while there's an existing solar facility, are subsequently developed by the marketplace. That there's no hold for any developers to develop a home. We have a nice example of a very similar project, or what would be a similar project in Indianapolis. It's about 20 minutes west of Indianapolis, in an area that's within the path of development and has been growing steadily. The farm has been there for almost 8 or 10 years now. And there was a large farm parcel right next to it that was developed with an enormous home. At the time, it was about $500,000 worth of investment into the land, including a massive in-ground swimming pool, and it's 150 feet from the house to the panels. We see situations like this all across the country, where developers have no problems in erecting homes that are directly in view of solar facilities. I concur with the other two people who spoke in front of me with regards to tax dollars, no stress on civil services by virtue of that tax revenue, and believe that they are also a wonderful and very quiet neighbor where other developments can successfully thrive right around them without any concerns. I'm happy to stick around, and if you guys have any questions at all about our data, methodology, or anything else, I'm happy to answer it for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else under public comment?
My name is Tom Knable.
Dina Knable.
We were at the last meeting, we had proposed no parking signs along Mound by our yard. We were just curious if there had been any developments or discussions or anything along those lines.
Nothing's evolved out of that. We're working with the police department regarding enforcement and some of that.
Okay.
I travel that regularly. In the last few weeks, has there been anybody over there?
Quite a few, actually, yeah.
Okay. But-
We've been trying to not call.
No,
In
I
respect
would
to the-
encourage you to call,
Oh.
which at that point creates the record.
Oh, okay.
I would encourage you to call.
We don't want to be a pain, you know?
It's, you're completely within your right.
Okay.
Especially as a taxpayer of the community. You know, if somebody's trespassing your property, by all means, call the police department.
Okay.
But if nothing at this point in the last 2 weeks has completely evolved out of it. We're working with the police department and the building department, trying to strategize a little bit more as to best practices.
Okay.
You have not been forgotten. Matter of fact, Chief Arnold can attest. We've literally just talked about it probably within the last week. So you're not a forgotten item that's being addressed.
Is this the preferred method to discuss this, or is there someone we could talk to?
Chief, he's going to give you a card. If he can get it out of his binder. Man.
Commissioner said they're expensive, not to give them out. Made them oversized.
Can you give him one that's not creased? Man. But by all means, don't hesitate. If somebody's trespassing your property, call 911. By all means, please. You are not a burden.
Okay.
And we will follow up again on this, right?
Thank you.
Within the next day or two. And without a doubt, don't hesitate to shoot him an email. He's following up with in regard to the police department in regards to enforcement as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any other residents wishing to address the village board? All right, seeing none, we'll move into this evening's consent agenda. Item number 1 will be approval of the regular meeting minutes for July 11, 2023. approval of the special committee of the whole meeting minutes of July 11, 2023. Approval of the accounts payable in the amount of $395,507.06 and payment in the amount of $45,707.92 to Brainbird Electronic Systems for the down payment for the boardroom broadcast room project. And finally, a payment in the amount of $48,760 to Morrow Brothers Ford for the police interceptor. Are there any questions regarding this evening's consent agenda as presented?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion Luciano, second Carroll. Roll call, please.
Brockman,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Luciano.
Yes.
And Amos.
Yes.
All right, consent agenda's been approved for this evening. We'll move into reports and communications. I don't have anything specific for this point at this time. Lana, have you received anything otherwise?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. With that, we will move into this evening's order of business. Item number 1 will be presentation of the 2023 Shorewood Police Pension Fund Valuation Report. Ms. Burkholder.
Thank you, Mayor. Presented tonight for your review is the actuarial evaluation of the Village of Shorewood Police Pension Fund performed back at April 1st of 2023. Not only is this a requirement of the fund each year to have a valuation performed, those results are necessary both for the village's financial audit and for the village to have an assessment of the appropriate amount of taxes to levy for the following year to keep that funded. Here tonight from Foster & Foster is Heidi Andorfer. She's been here the last couple of years talking to us about our performance, so I'll turn it over to her for the exciting part.
All right, thank you, Ann. Thank you for having us here tonight to present the report. Hopefully you all have a copy of that in front of you. I'm an actuary with Foster & Foster, and as Ann mentioned, I've been here the last couple of years to go through this with you. We're going to focus tonight on the funding of the plan. Your village has taken funding of this plan very seriously and has done a fantastic job of funding it to date. Our job is to make sure that continues to happen. We go through the calculations each year to make sure the appropriate numbers are levied. And with that, I'm going to start with page 5 of our report. So on page 5 of our report, there's 2 columns there. The leftmost column will be the one I'll focus on. That'll have this year's numbers in it. We do have last year's numbers for reference, so you can see how things have changed year over year. But focusing on that leftmost column on page 5, you could see that the village recommended contribution for the time period calculated here is $900,463. That's about an 8.6% increase from last year. That increase was driven by a couple of factors. So there's a natural increase in the normal cost each year as the population ages. In addition, you did have a slight headcount increase. And then there was some unfavorable experience year over year in the fund. That unfavorable experience was largely driven by asset returns. You're not unique in that. Most funds did experience that last year. Fortunately, it sounds like things are going in the right direction now from the measurement date, but we did perform this valuation as of April 1st. And so we take assets as of that point in time. So we'll see where we are next year. Hopefully that's reversed by then. In addition, salary increases were slightly higher than expected. So in some years, salary increases are lower. Some years they're higher. We're really trying to project salaries out to retirement age. So in any given year, we know we're going to miss. Hopefully over time, there's good years and bad years with respect to how close that assumption is. And by the time retirement comes about, our goal is that we've estimated that pretty accurately so that you've funded appropriately up to that point in time. And then the last thing, you did have some offset to some of those losses due to fewer retirements than expected. When retirements happen, they tend to trigger losses. In the years where there's not retirements, the plan experiences gains, so you're in that position right now. So building up a little bit of that gain cushion, so when that retirement happens, that loss is a little bit easier to handle. So with that, let's turn to page 7. Page 7 gets into some details here. It's worth noting that we did make a number of assumption changes last year. As a result, we really didn't have to revisit assumptions this year. Assumptions are something we revisit maybe on a 3 to 5 year schedule, depending on the direction that we see our assumptions going. If we see an assumption that's been significantly missing over a few years, we may proactively adjust that assumption. But in the end, what we're trying to do is again, predict that value out to retirement age, and so we're just trying to track how we're doing along the way. On this page, you can see that there, again, the two columns. If you're focusing on that leftmost column at the top, we do have participant data summarized. It's noteworthy here that there's 31 actives in your fund. That's up 1 from last year. We do snapshot valuations, so whoever is in the fund on April 1st and whatever their status is on April 1st is what is valued. So to the extent retirements have since happened, we'll pick those up in the next valuation. Your plan is a very young plan, so of the 41 participants, 31 were active. I'd say most plans in Illinois we actually see are a bit more mature than yours. What that says is you have more time to fund towards these retirement benefits. You have more time for your money to work for you. You're not paying out as much annually in benefit payments, so that offers you the luxury of time there. If we look at the assets here in section B on that page 7, you can see last year the relationship to actual value and market value showed actual value was a little bit lower than market value. So that tells us you had deferred gains that were not yet reflected. What actual value of assets are is the concept that we will smooth your gains and losses over a 5-year time frame. So when significant losses happen like they did last year for most funds, we don't reflect all of that at once. We only reflect 20% of that loss, and then we'll continue to reflect 20% of that over time. So we did the same thing with gains in the past, and so last year we were actually coming to you with an actual value lower than market value because of that smoothing. That situation's reversed due to the market last year, and now your actual value is higher than your market value by about 8%. So you have deferred losses that will eventually catch up. The last number on this page is the first liability calculation that we performed. So the bottom of that leftmost column, there's a number of $32.7 million. What that number represents is if all of the actual assumptions that we make come true and you are fully funding to all of the 41 participants in the plan to date and with the intention of not having to fund them anymore, you would want $32.7 million of assets. It's not a logical number to fund to because your actives are still accruing. So let's turn to page 8. And we actually break that up into the number you do want to target. And that's near the bottom of the leftmost column on page 8, $26.3 million. That number is representative of service that's already been earned to date. So if you were a fully funded plan, which not many plans in Illinois are, but if you were a fully funded plan, you would have $26.3 million in assets. So we compare that number to your assets to see what the shortfall is, and that's our unfunded actual accrued liability. So this is service that's already been earned by your population and still has to be paid for by the village. That's the $4.5 million number near the bottom of that column. That's effectively a mortgage that you have as a village on past service that's been earned, but still needs to be paid for through contributions. And that will be a component of our contribution then. That gives you a funded ratio of 82.9%. That's a slight decrease from last year given market conditions. That's pretty typical. The fact that it didn't move too much is pretty good to see. It decreased slightly, but hopefully, as I said, next year we see some recovery there. You're a very well-funded plan, I'd say, as plans in Illinois go. Most plans are probably in the 65-ish% range at this point. So the village has been doing the right thing with respect to the pension plan. The only other number I want to point out on this page is the total normal cost of $750,000. That is the cost of your active police force of earning 1 year of pension benefits. So by working 1 more year, it costs the pension fund $750,000. So on page 10, we roll all of that into the calculation of the contribution. Section E at the top here itemizes those components. So here we do apply interest. We know they're not paid on April 1st. You didn't have this information available to you on April 1st. They're paid later in the year through the levy process. And so we take the normal cost with interest. You add to that the administrative expenses here of about $22,000. And then you'd subtract from that the expected member contributions, because remember the police officers that are active are paying 9.91% of their salary towards this benefit. So they're actually offsetting some of that normal cost. So $304,000 of that is just payroll deductions that are helping pay for this benefit. In a perfect world, that would be your ongoing contribution. You'd take total normal costs plus administrative expenses, subtract those member contributions, and that would just be your annual contribution if you were fully funded. As I mentioned, you do have that mortgage on that unfunded liability that does need to be paid down, and that's the $381,000 number in the middle of the page. So 42% of the recommended contribution of $900,463 is just attributable to catching up on that service that's been earned. 42% is relatively low. Again, I've been to many funds where I'm saying 80% of the recommended contribution is just paying down that mortgage. So, you're in a pretty good position. Once you do pay that off, you obviously will see a lower contribution in the future. Section F is one section I do like to point out, and I will point this out to you. This year is a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. The village actually contributed about $778,000 towards the pension plan, while the recommended for that time period was $829,000. So it was a little bit short of the recommended amount. That's not typical of Shorewood. I'm sure there was a circumstance that presented that made that so, but we'll continue to monitor that and draw that to your attention to the extent that we see those shortfalls. But you contributed about 94% of the recommended amount. Okay. I'm going to turn you now to page 14. Page 14 is a reconciliation of the changes in the contribution year over year. So item 1 at the top shows you our recommended number last year of $829,000. Item 3 at the bottom shows you our contribution recommendation this year of $901,000. And this shows you the items that contributed to that increase. So specifically investment returns, one I've been highlighting, you can see about $33,000 of that increase is just due to the market. Again, you're not alone in that. We've seen this across all of the funds that we're consulting with this year. In addition, as I mentioned, the normal cost did increase. So $48,000 of the increase is just due to the growth in normal cost. That is offset by higher member contributions of $22,000. So it's really a net number that we're looking at there. But that contributed. You have one more active than you had last year, and then everybody's 1 year closer to retirement as well. You didn't see a lot of turnover or retirement, so those folks are still around. So those are really the main contributors to that increase. With that, are there any questions on our report?
Anybody have any questions regarding the pension report?
Who's in charge?
Only to
Oh,
add.
excuse me, go ahead, Rick.
I'd just like to know, are we in line to do that 900,000? Are we? Okay.
Trustee Brockman?
Who's in charge of our investment portfolio?
So right now, the funds have all been rolled into the consolidated fund with the state of Illinois. Well, the state is not technically running it. It is an independent fund, but it's run by the IPOPIF, the Illinois Police Officers Pension Investment Fund. And is it Versus is the investment advisor on that fund? I believe Marquette does fire, so I think it's a fund called like VERSES or something. Works on that fund in terms of the investments, but it is consolidated. So a couple years ago, legislation was passed to require all of the funds under Article 3 and then separately under Article 4 to consolidate all of their funds for investment purposes only. So you still have a police pension board that does make decisions regarding disabilities and such, but in terms of investments, it took the burden of making investment decisions off of your 5-member pension board, and it shifted it to the consolidated fund that invests this large sum of money for all of the funds across the state.
So our police pension board has no say on which way the money is.
The only thing the police pension board can do is they can pull money down into local accounts in cash-only investments. They are not allowed to invest in any, significant investments. And so generally speaking, most boards are trying to keep as much money in the consolidated fund as possible where there is more investment and market exposure. And with consolidation came the ability to have more market exposure because the rules prior to consolidation limited your 5-person pension board to what kind of investments they could make and how much they could invest in the market. So all of those restrictions were released when the money went to the consolidated board.
Thank you.
So, any other questions?
Anybody else?
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight.
All right, item number 2 will be consideration of an ordinance approving the final plat of a planned unit development and final site plan for the Hamptons of Shorewood Phase 1 in the village of Shorewood, Will County, Illinois. This item is up for its second read. Ms. Engel.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, we discussed the Hamptons of Shorewood. Oops, and it looks like I'm going to need to log back in. I'm going gonna just travel over there and log back into my computer. Get timed out. Oh, no, it didn't. Never mind.
There you go, it just popped
Okay,
back
thank
up.
you. Sorry about that. Okay, so,
Like to help, but
well, you looked at it right. Okay, so as we recall from last week, this is a 5-building phase. The first building shown in green is the mixed-use building, 13,500 square feet of retail with 2 stories of apartments above for a total of 22 apartments. There are 2 16-unit buildings shown in blue. Those are the rental condo-style buildings. And then the 2 8-unit buildings in orange, they're the townhome-style buildings that are for sale. On this next one, just wanted to kind of clarify the access to the development. It was a little bit confusing at the last meeting, so I colored the islands in, hopefully making it easier. So they'll be adding 2 turn lanes, 2 left turn lanes on Windstone Drive. One will be northbound to turn left into the town center. The other one will be southbound to turn left into this development. In the middle, on the lower island, so the southernmost island, there will be a refuge for people crossing the street at the crosswalk if they're crossing between the town center and the Hamptons, and they're a little slower or there's cars coming, they can stop in the middle and have a safe place to stop. There will be 1 lane coming in, 2 lanes going out. One will be a left turn lane and one will be a straight lane going to the Village Hall, as well as a right turn lane. At the north end, there's a right in, right out. There's no pork chop in the middle, but there's that, as you can see in green, that's like the island that runs up Windstone, so people will not be able to turn left. For the most part, there are 2 different types of roadways. There's private roads as well as Town Center Boulevard, which is a public road. So Town Center Boulevard and Hamptons Lane will both be 30 feet wide except by the median, and all of the lanes through the parking spaces will be at least 24 feet wide, which is our minimum. This plan shows the pedestrian access. Everything that's shown in yellow is a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and everything that's shown in red is an 8-foot wide asphalt path. So basically, they're going to have sidewalks along all of the buildings and on the north side of Town Center Boulevard, and then they'll have asphalt paths along the north side of Town Center Boulevard as well as along Windstone. This is the plan for phase 1, and basically it will go like every development in Shorewood that, you know, the engineers and everybody have reviewed the plans, and before they're able to start work, they'll have to post their sureties, which is essentially a letter of credit or bond for anything that's a public improvement in case there's an issue there, and they'll get all their building permits and inspections following the regular process. In terms of landscaping, you probably remember this slide. There's landscaping in the middle of the islands. There's landscaping along the streets, around the perimeter, and then around every building. One of the things that was outstanding last time is the selection had not been made yet for the air conditioning units in the 16-unit buildings. So we had a condition in there that we would take a second look at the landscape plans before issuing the building permits and make sure that there's adequate screening. Our code requires that we have at least 85% screening around the air conditioning units if they're more than 30 feet tall. In speaking with Ed Maddox, he agreed, you know, no matter what the size is, he'll put landscaping that's at least 2 inches taller than it, so that way we know we'll have good screening at the very beginning. He'll also screen the ComEd and NICOR meters. We don't really get to dictate where those go. ComEd and NICOR will dictate where those go, so he suggested arborvitae or something similar to screen those. We look at all of these landscape plans before we issue the building permit, and then when the building is done, we review the landscaping before they get their certificate of occupancy. If it's the dead of winter in January and they can't plant their bushes, then Mark's department will get an occupancy bond, which is the value, at least the value usually more of the landscaping, so that they have to put it in before they can get their money back, and we find that works well. The other outstanding item is with regard to photometrics. At this site, they intend to use the sort of village standard decorative light pole. These are the shorter poles like you see in the town center park or in the Village Hall parking lot or in front of Walgreens or CVS. They're an 18-foot tall pole with the sort of gooseneck light on it, so it puts the light at about 16 feet above grade, and the top of it's about 20 and a half feet above grade. So these are the shorter poles that you see in the pedestrian areas, not like the 30 or 35-foot poles that you see along the main streets. The developers looked at the idea of doing all street poles. It seemed a bit excessive, so he's proposing a mix of these decorative street poles as well as having lights on the actual building. So he'll have architectural lights at the entrance to the buildings. He hasn't made those selections yet, so our suggestion was to hold off until he had made those selections, so we review the plan as a whole and we have a whole view of what the lighting levels are going to be. A lot of comments have come up over the last week about the photometrics and questions about it that I'm really not qualified to answer. We have an engineer over at Christopher Burke Associates that reviews these things, so if there's a desire on the part of the board, we'd be happy to bring them in at a committee of the whole meeting to discuss photometrics, to discuss our ordinance. If there's any changes you want to the ordinance, we can discuss those, but they can also just kind of explain it in a better way than I can. One comment came up either today or yesterday from one of the trustees that we thought was worth mentioning, and he was concerned that there was the potential to go on to phase 2 without having built the mixed-use building, and everybody really wants that mixed-use building. So we did work with Dave Silverman today to add a condition into the ordinance that's before you today, written as follows, that the village will not approve phase 2 of the Hampstead's development unless and until the mixed-use building is under construction. We knew that Mr. Maddox intended to build that building early on. We called him, he was fine with this condition, so we thought we'd add it in for that extra layer of comfort. And that is all I have. I'm happy to answer questions or anything you've got.
Anybody have any questions on the overview?
So we're going to bring the,
Go ahead.
we spoke earlier about bringing the engineer in to review this plan, right?
So we'll have the engineer review this plan regardless. We don't have the expertise in-house to review this plan, so we'll have the engineer review this plan regardless. But I think what the last week kind of illustrated to me is we don't have a terribly good understanding of the photometrics plans, and it seems that there's a lot of concern about lighting levels. So if we want to have an engineer come in and give us a overview, a summary, so we understand it better, then we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
The lighting levels
We'll
here.
do that at a committee of the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so everybody's got a little bit of an understanding behind it.
If you don't mind, I can answer any clarifying questions. My name is Brent Maddox. I'm the Vice President of Construction with
He's one
Kipling.
who represents the petitioner.
I'm very familiar with the photometric plan that you're talking about. So yeah, that photometric plan was submitted. Photometric plans are basically takes into account all street lights. It doesn't take into any building lighting that is shining down on parking lots or areas like that. I think in some cases, this ordinance is maybe pertaining more to commercial parking lot lighting levels, not so much residential development type of lighting. So, but yeah, any other questions?
So Mr. Maddox did look at achieving our lighting level using only streetlights, and I think they required that would require something like 78 light
Yeah,
poles, which
so-
seemed excessive because there's going to be building lights, so we wanted to take it all into consideration.
That's correct.
Are the poles for this lighting, are they gonna be painted or powder coated?
They're powder coated.
They're powder coated?
Yes, sir.
They're using the village has a standard for lights in these areas. It's approved as part of the construction standards, so we dictate to them which lights they need to use. So they're going to be similar to
No,
what we
I'm
see.
concerned about the posts, because
Yeah.
the problem we had with the posts we had.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're recently painted. They look nice.
Any additional questions? Go
I
ahead.
have, not of him, but I have, question I have of Natalie is that, or of Dave also, that everything you just said is in the agreement. Everything that you went over right now, the overview, is in the agreement with Maddox.
The only thing that's not in the agreement with Mr. Maddox and his group is the requirement that there be a construction start on the multi-purpose building before they move into phase 2. That's not in the agreement. He has agreed to it, and we put it in the ordinance that you have in front of you tonight, and we'll ask that Mr. Maddox acknowledge that and agree to it in a letter.
And then the next question I had was the original question I had months ago, is that we're looking for a timely completion of the project. And I remember at that time you said we could not impose time limits on anything.
Well, I mean, it's kind of yes and no. You can't really make them build the buildings. The market's going to dictate a lot of that. But what we can require is the public improvements that are associated with this. And those are secured by a letter of credit or a bond, that if they don't complete those within 2 years, then they don't get to, then we will draw and we will finish them if necessary. Typically doesn't happen. But the other protection, I think, in there, trustee, is that before they get a occupancy permit in each unit as they go along, all the improvements in that unit have to be complete, with the exception that the road only has to be at a binder course because we wait to put that on at a later date. And as Natalie mentioned in her presentation, if it's, the dead of winter, then they can't complete the landscape, and then Mark's department gets it on. So it's pretty well set forth in the ordinances and the agreement that, they have to complete the improvements in each phase.
All right, well, what the bond is for the improvements, not necessarily for the building.
The buildings, no.
So we have no control at the time pace that the buildings get built,
Correct.
or the phase gets finished.
That's correct, yeah. I mean, it's just like any other development that we do, you approve the lots and the subdivision, and then they build out as the market dictates.
Do you have a start date for this project?
We don't currently have a start date because we don't have a firm approval to start. But we would like to get started, late this year. Timing gets late to start moving dirt and things like that weather-wise. Anticipating to try to get starting in October, if we get the green light to proceed.
The questions?
And I'm sorry, that would be starting with mass grading, getting sewer and water in, getting a few foundations in, would be the initial starting process.
This year?
Grubbing the site, getting the trees and brush.
This year though, right?
Yes, sir.
Any questions from this side?
Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance for the final plat of plan unit development and final site plan for the Hamptons of Shorewood Phase 1 in the village of Shorewood.
I'll second.
Motion Brockman, second Amos. Roll call, please.
Carroll,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Luciano,
Yes.
Amos,
Yes.
and Brockman.
Yes.
Item number 2 has been approved. We'll move on to business item number 3. An extra-jurisdictional review of Jasmine Solar proposal and the consideration for approval of a resolution of the Village of Shorewood, Illinois, objecting to the issuance of the special use permit to allow a solar energy facility on the property situated in close proximity to the corporate limits of the Village of Shorewood. And Ms. Engel.
Yes. So this is the project that Jasmine Solar and Kiara Gavin and her group spoke to you about earlier today. Will County has received an application for a special use permit for a solar energy facility. It's a 5 megawatt community solar energy facility that has the potential to produce 8 million kilowatts of electricity annually, which in layman's terms is about enough to power 1,100 homes. It is located on the 48-acre Feeney farm. There's a location map up there. As you'll see, it's essentially west of Feeney's Four Season Park. Immediately west, you have the ComEd lines and the right-of-way. Then you've got the Murphy Farms, and then there is the Feeney Farm where this proposal is. To the south of it is the Waterstone subdivision that's approved and zoned for residential and owned by the Zerkes, as well as the parcel that's owned by Minooka Grade School District, where they intend to build 1 or 2 schools. There's the site plan in front of you. There's various standards that Will County imposes that they've met. Basically, they have to have a 50-foot setback from the right-of-way line, a 50-foot setback from the property lines, a 150-foot setback from the homes. They have provided all of that. After the 50-foot setback, they have their fence and then a little wiggle room for getting around the property. They have an interconnection point into the overhead lines from ComEd. at the south end of the site, and then they go by overhead utility line to the property. There's an access gate with a gravel drive, I believe, and then they have a staging area. That whole staging area is surrounded by vegetative screening. We don't know exactly what it is, but they show a line of trees. Looks like it's probably arborvitae or something like that. And then once you get in, there's a 20-foot access way that runs up the north, from south to north in the property, and then goes across the property, and on either side of that, there are solar arrays. Here's a zoom in of the area close to Sile Road, so you see the access point, you see the overhead utility lines, the gate, and whatnot. Up top is what one of their solar arrays will look like, kind of similar to what you see next to the fertilizer plant on Jefferson Street. And there's just a zoom in of the map showing, how it'll look. There's going to be lines of the solar arrays. I think they're just under 8 feet wide, and then there will be about 16 feet between them, just to give you an idea. Will County has a fairly detailed ordinance that lays out what they can do in terms of solar. In their ordinance, solar energy facilities are allowed as a special use in the agricultural or industrial districts. This property is zoned A1 in Will County, so from that perspective, it's appropriate. Shorewood obviously doesn't have zoning out there because we're not annexed, but our comp plan does call for that to be single-family detached residential. That's what's shown in the 2023 comp plan, and I looked at comp plans back to 1993, and that's sort of what we've expected since 1993 on that area. They're allowed a maximum height at full tilt of 20 feet. What they're proposing is less than that. It's 12 feet at full height. The setbacks I went through, they've met the setback requirements. They're allowed to have a perimeter fence of 6 to 25 feet in height. Will County allows razor wire or barbed wire by right. As they've described, they're going to be putting in a 7-foot fence, which is lower. I guess theoretically it could be increased in height, but that's certainly not what they've proposed at this time. Will County requires that on-site power and utility lines be buried unless it's approved as part of the special use permit. In this case, they're proposing overhead power and utility lines. So Will County would have the authority to approve that from my read. There's a pre-construction meeting with Will County. We have not been invited to be part of the pre-construction meeting, but we were told about the public hearing, and Will County's been responsive to us with that. The applicants even asked that the public hearing be moved so that we could discuss this evening. They have to meet with the highway department, and they did meet with all of staff to discuss their project. And then the county doesn't require any right-of-way dedication. No right-of-way here is being dedicated. There's also certain requirements that we just didn't have when we wrote the staff report, like a glare study and an agricultural study and things like that. The county did provide them today, and they seem to meet all of those requirements. In some respects, we really love the idea of the solar farm. We agree solar energy is great and that it helps reduce dependence on fossil fuels and foreign energy. We think it's great that you can use this to essentially power up to 1,100 houses. We think it can reduce the cost of living. I think the people who subscribe to this solar facility get a discount on their energy. It's good for the land, from what I understand, and it's a relatively low-intensity industrial use. We have some concerns about solar energy. This is one of about 5 or 6 groups that are looking at areas west of our town, so we have to look at them carefully, and I think that soon we'll be probably asking you to consider an ordinance to talk about where we'd allow them. But looking at the site, we're a little bit concerned about its location. It doesn't fit the comp plan vision of single-family detached residential. We don't think it's overly compatible with residential uses. Will County allows it in the industrial and agricultural districts. We think that's appropriate. Shorewood is right next door, right across the street. So we really think that it's fairly soon that this can be developed as residential, and we already have water at the public works site and sewer at the public works site, and it'll be no time before we have water over there, especially with regard to the Lake Michigan Water Project, where we'll be required to. Windstone subdivisions across the street, that's residential. Minooka's across the street, school district. We think it could have an impact on land values. They argued that it didn't, and maybe that's the case, but we feel that it most likely makes those farms less marketable for residential. As part of the Lake Michigan Water Project, we had to project population out to 2030. If the land west of our village limits that's proposed for residential starts getting eaten up for solar farms, we're probably not going to reach that. So that's also a concern. We're concerned about the fact that we have Four Seasons Park in that location. That's a beautiful park. It's next to a school. It's nicely connected to the residential neighborhoods. And if we put a solar farm there, you're not going to have that same connectivity where, kids can get on their bikes and drive through the neighborhood and the neighborhood next door and get to the park. We think that the solar farm will kind of cut that off. And we think that's, the community park is a really big asset for that area, and it's a nice asset to residential areas. So we would prefer to have residential in that area. We were concerned about the buzz and rotation noise. It sounds like there will be some noise, but it will be minimal. I think we'd like to understand that a little bit better. We've also got some concerns about the impact on views. Obviously, people like to look out their window and see something familiar. That they like to see another single-family dwelling or another house. They're not so used to looking at solar farms. It's more of an agricultural, industrial use. The lawn maintenance is different. Shorewood is a community where everybody likes to mow their lawns to, look perfect and have that perfect grass carpet and water their lawns. In this case, the lawn's able to get much taller. They intend to mow it about 6 times a year. It'll be prairie grasses. It won't necessarily fit that aesthetic of the well-manicured lawn in a residential area. Security fence, even if it doesn't have barbed wire up front, it's still chain link fence. It's typically not allowed in Shorewood subdivisions. There's also a fiscal impact. We don't think that they're going to have a direct impact because they're not going to be using our sewer and water, but typically when we annex properties, those properties contribute to the cost of improving the roads in front of their properties and the cost of bringing the sewer and water lines in front of their properties. And if properties are taken offline and don't contribute that way, it just makes it more costly for either the village or the other developers and less likely that we can actually develop that area as we expected and meet those goals of having the population at a certain number by 2030. So from that perspective, we think there's pros and cons. We would love to see solar come to the area. We're concerned that this isn't the right location. We wanted to lay it out for you. We do have a resolution in the package should you wish to recommend denial to the county. Obviously, the county is the one who has the vote. They're having a meeting on August 15th. So if you have a resolution that you wish to adopt, we'd be happy to go and present it. We also think that it's necessary for us to start talking about solar in general because there is so much desire to put solar in this area and west of our boundaries.
Does the petitioner want to make any comments?
That should be your test.
Thank you, and thanks, Natalie, for the overview. I will touch on a few of the points that Natalie mentioned and want to talk about, again, to kind of what I mentioned earlier, is we would really love to come to the table with Shorewood and talk about how can we design the project to mitigate some of those points or decrease the impact of the project on some of those points. Regarding the connectivity question, it's something that we've thought about since my initial discussion with the village staff, and we are prepared to install as part of connecting and continuing the existing or planned paths or trails along the north and the south of the project, trails for continuance to that point in terms of connectivity from the west to Four Seasons Park over to the east. Beyond that, if there are planned right-of-way expansion or a right-of-way dedication needed, that's definitely something we're open to considering if part of expanding Style Road is part of the village's plans or what's needed for this growth in this direction. Those are things that are certainly on the table. Other elements that I wanted to touch on, yes, in terms of the fence aesthetic concerns, it's something where, we could, as in our current proposed design, we have screening along the roadway and screen from the existing residences. We could, in discussion with Will County, have for example, a condition of approval on the special use permit that if and when residences are installed, that we could similarly be installing screening along those edges of the fence line. So in terms of view or someone looking directly at a chain link fence or directly at solar panels, that there would be that screening in place. The other thing that we're thinking about is our total project footprint and a way that we could support the village or really be a good neighbor to the village is how we could potentially sort of compact our design slightly, shift the project, condense the project a little bit north on the property, so a little bit tighter design in terms of our separation of solar arrays, or different ways that engineers could accomplish that in terms of shifting our southern boundary up on the project. And we'd be interested in dedicating or donating some of that southern acreage to the village. So if that's going to be turned into, if it's on very near horizon to be ready to be turned into residential development, that's a possibility. If, there's interest in the village putting another playground across the street from the school, like lots of possibilities. I think just want to express that we are willing to continue talking with the village and want to make this compatible with the rest of the development you all have planned. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you. Again, Dave Stryker, and I would just note that the language in the proposed resolution is very strong. For instance, the ordinance does not require berms or screening from adjoining property, therefore the solar field will not be in any way visually buffered. I just think it goes a little too far, and that's not how we intend to develop this. When you have a project that's next to existing transmission and a rail line that's set back, again, from the residents, you have residential transmission rail. You typically don't screen that heavily. That's why you don't see that in our plans. But again, working closely with the village, if there were specific concerns, we can address that. So I think I pointed out a number of those areas in my opening comments, and I would just stress, I think the resolution goes beyond what the facts are, and I would encourage the board to hold off on this. Please ask the questions at the hearing, and then, as Kira said, we'd really like to work with you closely on this.
Thank you. Is question?
Is there property east of this,
Yes.
between the tracks and this piece of property?
Two farms. It's kind of hard to see their thin parcels.
They've been contacted by you folks?
So they've received the public notice regarding the project for the public hearing.
Because what are you going to do with a strip of property that's only 100 feet wide, or what is it, 120 feet wide?
Well, our landowners are here tonight, but I believe that land's currently farmed, and the plan would be to continue. Is it row crops? Row crops. But again, that's private property, so that's what they're doing.
I know,
right now.
it's
Yeah.
private, but I'm saying it's kind of out of place, isn't it now? You got that kind of landlocked, or I don't know what the word is, but.
Well, again, that's why one of the presentations at the public hearing is going to be Andrew Lyons to show in detail what they've seen in other areas. I think the Indianapolis example being the most relevant of solar actually being a good fit this type of development, especially when you've got the project up against the rail and the existing transmission.
But it's not up against it, is it? Isn't
Well,
it a farm away?
Dave, we got the two parcels with the row crops in there right now.
Yeah.
It's our understanding that many of the property owners to the west of our boundaries have been contacted, so some of them have at least been thinking about solar. We haven't, received any notice on those properties. We don't know if they've got any, deals with regard to solar or residential, or if they want to keep farming.
Were you talking about the western parcels, Dave? Because I was just talking about the eastern ones.
I mean, to the east, I think the trustee's point, Dave, is that there are the two farms there to the east, and it'll make difficult development opportunities for that farm. How do you develop that when normally there'd be a comprehensive development taking care of the whole area? I think that's what the trustees get.
Exactly. Thank you, Dave.
Wide enough to go.
Again, all I know is that they're currently farmed and that.
So I think, and generally our relationship has been positive. I think we don't always share the best vision, you know, the same vision for this property, but I think that, you know, they've shown willingness to work for us, so that the question really becomes, how strongly do we feel about this? Do we feel that we need to stand our ground and say, you know, yes, this really is a residential property ultimately and not a solar farm property, and we want to object, or do we want to talk about meeting in the middle, or, you know, how do we want to handle that? I guess we're looking for direction.
So like, before we go anything else, do any of the other trustees have any questions for the petitioner?
No.
No, I think he's answered it, but I do have a comment.
Go ahead.
And I do understand that solar's probably something that we may want, but I'm wondering if that's the best use for that property there, being that we have plans for residential and expansion there. And in our comprehensive plan, as you mentioned, I don't know if it would be the best use for the village. That's how I feel about it.
So with that, I ask either for a recommendation to support the objection resolution, or I ask for a motion to table this item.
I'll make a motion for the objection to the resolution.
I have a motion from trustee Luciano on for the resolution of objection. I have a second from trustee Brockman. Roll call, please.
Chapman?
Yeah, just one comment before I vote. You know, would we have Earl Park, or Earl Road Industrial Park, if we could back up 40 years, 40, 50 years? Probably not. So, I vote to approve this resolution.
Luciano?
Yes.
Amos?
Yes.
Brockman?
Yes.
And Carroll.
Yes.
All right, item number 3 has been approved. Resolution of objection to the county regarding the special use permit. Moving on to business item number 4, be consideration for approval of the purchase of the census water meters and the water meter accessories from Corn, Maine in the amount of $146,250. Public Works Director Noriega.
Thank you, Mayor. So continuing with our water meter replacement program, we are requesting approval for purchasing additional water meters for our inventory. We are currently approximately 80% complete with our program. We have almost a total of 6,600 meters in our system, customers. So it's probably around 1,200, 1,300 left to go. We use census meters and accessories, and Corn, Maine is the sole source supplier in this area. You recall last year, many of the municipalities, including ourselves, we were struggling with supply chain issues and trying to keep inventory for both our replacement program and any development that was occurring, as we are requiring meters in their households. Our budget includes almost $200,000 for this program. The quote that you have in front of you is $146,250. That is for the purchase of 150 3/4-inch meters and 150 1-inch meters, along with the accessories for such. We are recommending the village board approve the purchase in the amount of $146,250 from Corn, Maine for census water meters and accessories. Any questions?
Will this get us to 100% then, or no?
No.
How
much?
close?
40%, 50%.
I thought you said we're 80% done.
Oh, so of the 1,200, this will add 300, plus we have a few hundred in stock of different sizes.
The ones we have.
So how many do we have to go
A
currently?
total of 1,200 about left
More?
to go in our meter program replacement.
How many do we already complete?
Asking me for math, 40,
Well, just close, you don't have to be exact.
60, 5,400 completed.
We've got about 5,200-ish households done.
I don't have enough fingers.
About 5,400 households are done thus far, so.
Households or customers?
Customers.
Customers, yeah, okay.
Good point of clarification. Customers.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to approve the meters.
I'll make the motion to approve the meters, consideration for the approval of the purchase of the census, water meters and water meter accessories from Core and Main in the amount of $146,250 even.
Second.
Motion Amos, second Carroll. Roll call, please.
Luciano,
Yes.
Amos,
Yes.
Brockman.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
And Chapman.
Yes.
All right, number 4 has been approved. Business item number 5 will be consideration for approval of a contract toward Superior Road striping for the annual pavement marking program with an amount not to exceed $50,000 and waive the formal bid process. Public Works Director Noriega.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is routine maintenance for our roadway system. With time, normal wear and tear, snow removal operations, our pavement markings do wear out and lose reflectivity. Our markings is a modified urethane that we use. We install them in recessed grooves to help provide longevity, especially during our snow removal operations. We did reach out to 4 local vendors, stripers that provide this service. 3 of them had provided the proposals. Superior Road striping is the low proposal at an amount of $36,158.95. Superior Road striping also, just for your knowledge, has worked in the village in the past. They completed this program for us in the year 2020, 2021. And for your knowledge also, we also have our fiscal budget that allows for about $100,000 in additional payment marking throughout the entire village. We are recommending the village board waive the formal bid process and approve the proposal from SRS with an amount not to exceed $50,000. Any questions?
Noria, who did 2022?
We didn't have one.
We didn't have to do any marking in 22?
No, it was all part of the resurfacing contract, and we used their sub.
Oh, okay.
There was no additional markings we did.
If the contract is 36,000 and whatever, why are we approving 50,000?
It allows, just in case when we talk about quantities, a lot of our quantities are estimates. I didn't go out there with a wheel and measure each stripe. So these are estimated quantities, did some measurements using aerial mapping that we were able to get it, and we will actually use the actual quantities used. Sometimes when we're working right along, and for example, we're targeting Verton Boulevard, there is a lot of striping in there, a lot of hatching, especially at fire hydrant. We may add a stop bar that is right adjacent that we may not have. So these are just for those little extras, just in case.
I have a question, I'll ask later. That's all I had.
Anybody else have any questions for Noriel? Motion to approve striping.
So moved.
Motion Chapman,
I'll second.
second Amos. Roll call, please.
Amos,
Yes.
Brockman,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
and Luciano.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 5 has been approved. We move into our trustee comments for this evening. Trustee Amos.
No comment, thank you, Mayor.
No problem. Trustee Brockman.
Thank you, Mayor. Natalie, I talked to you earlier today, I forgot to ask you the main question. Do we have a meeting on August 2nd? We do. We do, okay. And the 2 agenda items that you wrote about is what we're looking at?
I think so. I think the library parking lot is one of them, and there's a couple of other people who are racing, trying to see if they can get their plans ready.
Okay, very good. And just for information, did DeLong come before us and ask us about their solar farm?
No, but I think they may fall under a different category because that's accessory to their primary use, and it's not a solar farm as a principal use. So I think it may be different. Because I believe that their solar farm is just powering their plant, and I don't think it's putting stuff into the grid.
You're correct, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Carroll.
Do we have any new information on Sile Road from the last report you gave that you met with IDOT on?
No, but thank you for mentioning IDOT. We did just get notification within the last 4 days, 5 days. The state is pursuing land acquisition at 52 and County Line for the roundabout. So they are moving forward in that context and intersection improvements out there. So we're glad to see that project is still moving forward. But yeah, no, we had not heard anything else in regards to
Okay.
the Sile Road.
No.
Trustee Chapman?
No report.
No problem. Trustee Luciano?
I had a question, Noriel, on the resurfacing project in Walnut Trails. I noticed today that they've finished the paving on most of the streets, but I noticed that it seems like they only did the crosswalks on half of Whinstone, halfway across Whinstone and not all the way across. Are they gonna complete the lines across from the north side to the south side?
You're referring to
Or
the...
east to the west,
You're
I'm sorry.
referring to the pavement marking, right?
Right, for where the pedestrians cross.
We were not going to do any of the pavement markings along Whinstone itself, so they only touched upon anything that may have been disturbed as part of the contract.
You might want to take a look at it because some of them look like they're missing.
I have quantity in the new approval that I'll take a look to see if this is something we can
I just noticed this today. It looks like only 4 feet and then empty, and then on the other side, like 4 feet.
I'll take a look at it, sir.
Other than that, the only thing I have is that the Citizen Advisory Committee will meet again in September, and anyone interested in getting involved, they can contact myself or other members on the village website. That's it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
If I may.
You cannot. You are beyond public comment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
With that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion trustee Luciano,
Second.
second trustee Amos. Roll call, please.
Brockman.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Chapman.
Yes.
Luciano.
Yes.
And Amos.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
National